In this session, we want to look at how organizations are designed. How do we divide up work and structure it? And to motivate this question, let's start with an even more basic one, which is why do organizations even exist in the first place? Now, we almost never stop to think about this, but why is it that collections of people get together and people aren't just working on their own? The famous economist Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations offers an explanation for this, which he illustrates with a pin factory. So a pin being that little metal object you use in sewing, he essentially argues that the factory becomes a powerful illustration of why we want to divide up labor and how that creates efficiencies. And in a famous passage, he describes the fact that if one person alone were trying to make a pin, they might be able to make 10 in a day. There's so many different parts to what they're doing, and they're not that skilled in it. But as he was visiting pin factories in England in the 1700s, he said that he could see the work divided up in different ways. One man draws out the wire, another straightens it, a third one cuts it, a fourth one puts a point on it, a fifth one grinds it so that you can put a head on the top of the pin, and then others put the head on the top of the pin. And by dividing up work across a bunch of different people who could then specialize in it, 5 or 10 men could then produce 48,000 pins in a day. So the answer to why organizations exist is that we need this differences in expertise, that we can have these different specialties that allow us to then be much more productive. But it also then raises a basic challenge that we have in every organization, which is once we've divided up work, can we coordinate it and put it back together? And in a famous study, Herb Simon, who was a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and one of his colleagues, Dearborn, had a set of managers read a Harvard-style case with lots of detail in it, 50 pages of detail, and try to analyze what problem do you see here and what solution would you offer. And in the columns, they categorized, did the manager see a sales problem, an org design problem, or some kind of human relations problem? They then classified the answers that people gave by the function that they occupied within the firm. Were they a salesperson, a production person, or an HR person, or something else? And what was striking about the results that they got was that there was a very distinct pattern that people tend to see what they're specialists in. Salespeople see sales problems, production people see a design problem, HR people see some sort of human relations problem. Now, this is a good thing. It means that because people have different expertise, they can bring to bear expert knowledge on it. But it also becomes a potential obstacle. So as we have to reach an agreement on what we should do to solve a problem, we have these different people with their different lenses arguing about being right about what the solution is. And then we have this challenge of how do we bring people back together. So with this as our basic principle that having people specialize is why we create organizations, we can then start thinking about different organizational forms and what benefits and costs they impose. So let's start then with a very simple small organization, and we'll build on our conversations about Lincoln Electric from the past and think about what their experiences were like at the beginning of their organization. So early on, they literally had 2 employees, John Lincoln and James Lincoln, and they had to decide how are they going to divide up the manufacture of building arc welders. Were they both going to do that as well as sell the equipment, or were they going to specialize? So one would focus just on manufacturing, and the other would focus on sales and marketing. Let's think through what goes into that calculation. Some things that push for everybody doing everything is the benefit of coordination. One of the key challenges you face when you're building equipment and selling it is getting the right number built to be sold so that you don't get things out of whack. So that helps coordination. If you're doing both parts, you build the ones that you need to sell, you sell the ones that you've built, it helps coordinate. It also helps with what we've talked about with intrinsic motivation, that you see more of the whole product by being involved with everything. And frankly, it's more interesting day in and day out in terms of skill variety because you're getting to use different skills. Both of those push for let everybody do some of everything. Startups obviously face the same question, which is how specialized versus how broad are members of the organization. Now, other factors push towards specializing. So one is maybe some people are better at manufacturing and some people are natural people who are good at sales. Then dividing up the work so that you tap into your skill and your preference is beneficial. The other is that by simply repeating the same activity over and over again, you develop insights about how to do it best. You develop new techniques, you develop new habits that allow you to be more effective. That pushes towards specialization. And so the basic first answer to org design tends to be, let's tap into the specialization and have different people do different things. And therefore, the first design that most organizations organize around is a functional one. So we have specialists in engineering, specialists in manufacturing, specialists in marketing. What happens in this design is that there's only one place in the organization where all the information comes together. So information has to be passed up to the top and decisions are passed down through these silos. This is great in terms of allowing special expertise to develop, but it becomes cumbersome because there's so much reliance on the big picture being kept at the top. It relies a lot on supervision from above. And it develops this functional myopia we talked about with Dearborn and Simon, that engineers and marketing people don't really understand each other. They have a hard time talking to each other and coordinating. And so as we think about specialization as the motivation for how we organize, we then start seeing the problems that arise. And in the next segment, we're going to talk about other forms that try to get around the costs that arise with a functional form.